In the middle of the night, in the darkest corner of Los Angeles, Tom Hardy was meeting men he should never have met. That meeting would change everything. What happened in that abandoned warehouse in downtown LA would connect one of Hollywood's most respected actors to a criminal organization that had been manipulating the entertainment industry for decades. This isn't just another celebrity scandal. This is the story of how Tom Hardy became entangled with forces that could destroy his career, his family, and possibly his life. Before we dive into this shocking investigation, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to learn about Tom Hardy's secret connections will change everything you thought you knew about how Hollywood really works. The date was October 23rd, 2019. Tom Hardy sat in his blacked-out Range Rover, parked in an alley that most Angelenos wouldn't dare visit even in daylight. The industrial district of downtown LA stretched out around him. Empty warehouses, abandoned lots, and the kind of shadows where legitimate business never happened. He checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the meeting that would either save his career or destroy it forever. The message had come 3 days earlier, delivered not through his agent or manager, but slipped under the door of his private dressing room on the Venom 2 set. No signature, no letterhead, just an address and a time written in block letters that looked more like a ransom note than a business proposal. "Don't tell anyone about this meeting," the note had warned. "Your future depends on it." Hardy had almost thrown it away. In his 20-year career, he'd received thousands of strange requests, bizarre propositions, and outright threats from unstable fans. But something about this message felt different. It felt official. The return address led him to a company called Meridian Holdings, a name that appeared in the credits of some of his biggest films, but which he'd never really questioned. Production companies, distribution networks, financial backers, they were all just names on contracts to most actors. But now, someone wanted to meet about Meridian Holdings, someone who preferred midnight meetings in abandoned warehouses. As Hardy sat in his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The street appeared empty, but in LA's criminal underworld, appearances meant nothing. He'd played enough gangsters to know that the most dangerous meetings happened in places exactly like this. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Building 47, 3rd floor, come alone?" Hardy looked up at the massive warehouse looming in front of him. Building 47. The windows were either boarded up or shattered, and graffiti covered most of the lower walls. It looked like the kind of place where people went to disappear. But he'd come this far, and the truth was, his career had been built on relationships with people he'd never really investigated. Producers who appeared out of nowhere with unlimited budgets, distributors who could guarantee international releases, financiers who asked no questions about where their money came from. Maybe it was time to learn who had really been controlling his success all these years. Hardy stepped out of his car and walked toward the warehouse, unaware that this meeting would reveal a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of Hollywood, and that his own career had been carefully orchestrated by an organization that operated far outside the law. The stairwell inside Building 47 smelled of rust and decay. Hardy's footsteps echoed as he climbed to the 3rd floor, each step taking him deeper into what felt like a trap. But curiosity, and perhaps something darker, drove him forward. The 3rd floor was a maze of empty offices with broken windows and exposed wiring. Most doors hung open, revealing ransacked rooms that hadn't seen legitimate business in years. But at the far end of the hallway, light spilled from under a single door. Hardy knocked twice, as instructed. "Come in, Mr. Hardy." The voice was calm, cultured, with the kind of accent that suggested expensive education and old money. Hardy pushed open the door and stepped into what looked like a fully furnished executive office, completely at odds with the abandoned building surrounding it. Behind a mahogany desk sat a man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. 2 other men flanked the desk, younger and clearly muscle, despite their business attire. "Please sit," the man said, gesturing to a leather chair across from the desk. "I'm Vincent Castellano. I believe it's time we had a proper conversation about your career." Hardy remained standing. "I've never heard of you." Castellano smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, but I've been watching your career with great interest. You see, Mr. Hardy, I represent certain interests that have been instrumental in your success." "What kind of interests?" "The kind that prefer to remain anonymous." Castellano opened a thick folder on his desk. "Shall we review your filmography?" Bronson, 2008, financed through Meridian Holdings. The Dark Knight Rises, 2012, international distribution handled by Castellano Entertainment Group. Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015. Completion bond provided by Pacific Security Solutions. Hardy's blood ran cold. Those were three of his biggest films, career-defining roles that had established him as a major star. And apparently they all had connections to organizations he'd never heard of. You're saying you financed my films? Not directly, but the money that financed them, let's say it took interesting routes to reach those productions. Castellano leaned back in his chair. The entertainment industry requires enormous amounts of cash, Mr. Hardy. Studios, distributors, completion bond companies, they all need capital. And sometimes that capital comes from sources that prefer discretion. The implication hit Hardy like a physical blow. You're talking about money laundering. I'm talking about business, Mr. Hardy. Complex business that keeps Hollywood running. Castellano's tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. Your talent got you noticed, but our financial infrastructure got you cast. Hardy finally sat down, his mind racing. What do you want from me? Nothing you haven't already been giving us. You see, every major film you've starred in has been an excellent vehicle for moving large amounts of money through legitimate channels. International distribution deals, foreign tax incentives, complex production partnerships. It's all quite above board, technically speaking. One of the men flanking Castellano stepped forward and placed a tablet on the desk. The screen showed financial documents, transfer records, bank statements, company filings. Hardy could see his name throughout the paperwork, but the amounts and account numbers meant nothing to him. These documents show approximately $200 million in transactions connected to your films over the past decade, Castellano explained. Money that needed to be cleaned, legitimized, integrated into the legal economy. Your movies provided the perfect vehicle. Hardy stared at the screen, trying to process what he was seeing. I never agreed to this. I didn't know any of this was happening. Of course you didn't. That's what made it so effective. Castellano's smile turned patronizing. Actors focus on their craft. Businessmen focus on business. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Was, Hardy said firmly. This stops now. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The two men flanking Castellano shifted slightly, their jackets falling open just enough to reveal shoulder holsters. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Mr. Hardy. You see, you're not just an actor anymore. You're a business partner, and our business partnerships are permanent. Hardy's hand moved instinctively toward his phone, but Castellano shook his head. I wouldn't recommend making any calls. Your phone has been monitored for quite some time, as have your emails, your bank accounts, your family's movements. Castellano's voice remained calm, but the threat was unmistakable. We protect our investments, Mr. Hardy. All of them. The full scope of his situation began to dawn on Hardy. How long has this been going on? Since your breakthrough role in Bronson. That film was specifically chosen as a test case, a low-budget prison drama with international appeal, perfect for our needs. When it performed exactly as projected, we knew we'd found a reliable asset. Hardy thought back to 2008, to the role that had launched his career. He'd been so grateful for the opportunity, so focused on the performance, that he'd never questioned the unusual financing arrangements or the complex distribution deals. The subsequent films were progressively larger operations, Castellano continued, each one allowing us to move more money more efficiently. Your rising star power provided perfect cover for increasingly sophisticated financial arrangements. And if I refuse to participate going forward, Castellano opened another folder, this one containing photographs. Hardy's blood froze as he saw images of his wife and children, arriving at school, walking the dog, shopping for groceries. The photos were recent, high quality, and clearly taken without their knowledge. Your family lives a comfortable life, Mr. Hardy. Private schools, security details, international travel. It would be unfortunate if circumstances required us to adjust those arrangements. The threat was crystal clear. Hardy's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. What exactly do you want from me? Continued cooperation. Your next 3 films are already in development through our network of production companies. All you need to do is what you've always done. Deliver outstanding performances that ensure commercial success. Castellano slid a contract across the desk. This formalizes our arrangement. Standard exclusivity clause with some additional provisions regarding confidentiality and compliance. Hardy didn't touch the document. And if I sign this, your career continues its trajectory. Your family remains safe. Our business prospers. Castellano's tone suggested this was a generous offer. You'll be one of the most successful actors of your generation. And if I don't, the 2 men flanking Castellano stepped closer to Hardy's chair. Let's not explore that scenario, Mr. Hardy. I think you understand the stakes. Hardy stared at the contract. his mind racing through possibilities. He could call the FBI, but Castellano claimed to be monitoring his communications. He could go public, but who would believe such an outlandish story? And even if they did, would exposing the truth put his family in more danger? "I need time to think," Hardy said finally. "Of course, but not too much time." Castellano checked his expensive watch. "Shall we say 72 hours? That should be sufficient to review the terms and consider your options." Hardy stood to leave, but Castellano's voice stopped him at the door. "Mr. Hardy, I hope you'll make the right decision. It would be a shame to see such a promising career derailed." As Hardy walked back through the abandoned warehouse, he realized that his entire success had been built on a foundation he'd never seen, funded by money he'd never questioned, controlled by people he'd never met. The roles that had made him famous, the films that had defined his career, all of it had been orchestrated by an organization that operated in the shadows of Hollywood. But now that he knew the truth, there was no going back. The question was, would he become a willing participant in their criminal enterprise, or find a way to expose them without destroying everything he'd worked for? Outside, Los Angeles stretched out under the night sky, a city of dreams and nightmares, where the line between success and corruption was often thinner than the contracts that bound them together. And somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, Vincent Castellano's organization was already planning their next move, confident that Tom Hardy would make the only choice that made sense. They had no idea that their newest business partner was already developing a plan of his own. Hardy drove through the empty LA streets, his mind churning with the impossible choice he'd been given. The city looked different now. Every neon sign, every billboard advertising the latest blockbuster, every studio lot representing not just entertainment, but potential criminal enterprise. He thought about calling the FBI immediately, but Castellano's words echoed in his mind. "Your phone has been monitored for quite some time." If they were watching his communications, any move he made would be anticipated. The photographs of his family burned in his memory. His wife Charlotte dropping their son off at school, completely unaware that dangerous men were documenting her every move. The casual way Castellano had displayed those images made it clear this wasn't an idle threat, but there was something Castellano didn't know about Tom Hardy. Years of playing complex characters had taught him to think like them, to understand how criminal minds operated, and his research for roles like Bronson and Legend had brought him into contact with former law enforcement officers who dealt with organized crime. Over the next 48 hours, Hardy began implementing a plan that would have impressed any of the characters he'd portrayed. He couldn't use his phone or email, but he could still move freely around the city. He arranged seemingly innocent meetings with old friends who happened to work in law enforcement consulting. He visited public libraries to research Meridian Holdings and the other companies Castellano had mentioned. What he discovered was a web of legitimate businesses with hidden connections to criminal enterprises. The same financial networks that had funded his films were also connected to everything from international drug trafficking to political corruption. His career hadn't just been a vehicle for money laundering, it had been part of a massive criminal conspiracy. The research revealed that Castellano's organization had been operating since the 1980s, using Hollywood productions as their primary method for legitimizing criminal proceeds. They had connections to Italian-American crime families, Russian oligarchs, and even terror financing networks. The scope was staggering. Billions of dollars moved through seemingly legitimate entertainment industry transactions. Hardy learned that he wasn't their only asset. At least a dozen other A-list actors had unknowingly participated in similar arrangements, their careers carefully managed to maximize money laundering opportunities. The organization had essentially been puppet mastering major portions of Hollywood for decades. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that several actors who had tried to break free from these arrangements had suffered mysterious accidents or sudden career downturns. A leading man who died in a suspicious car crash after threatening to expose financial irregularities. A beloved actress whose career imploded following a series of manufactured scandals after she asked too many questions about her film's funding sources. The deadline approached. Hardy knew he had to give Castellano an answer, but he also knew that signing the contract would make him a conscious participant in criminal activity. There would be no plausible deniability, no claim of ignorance. On the morning of the third day, Hardy made his choice. He drove to the FBI field office in Westwood and walked through the front door. 3 hours later, he emerged wearing a wire and carrying a modified copy of Castellano's contract, one that had been carefully prepared to gather maximum evidence when signed. FBI Special Agent Maria Santos had been tracking Castellano's organization for 5 years without being able to penetrate their operations. Hardy's testimony provided the breakthrough they needed, but it also put him in extraordinary danger. Once you walk into that meeting wearing a wire, Santos warned him, there's no going back. These people have killed for much less than what you're about to do. Hardy's response was simple. They threatened my family. That was their mistake. The meeting that night in Building 47 would be very different from the first one. This time, Hardy wouldn't be walking into a trap. He'd be setting one. The second confrontation was even more intense than the first. Castellano, sensing something different in Hardy's demeanor, became increasingly suspicious. When Hardy asked detailed questions about the money laundering process, ostensibly to understand his role better, Castellano's answers provided exactly the evidence the FBI needed. But the operation nearly went sideways when one of Castellano's men detected the recording equipment. A violent struggle ensued, ending only when FBI tactical teams stormed the building. Hardy barely escaped with his life, but the recordings captured enough incriminating evidence to bring down the entire network. What followed was an 18-month investigation that would ultimately bring down one of the largest money laundering operations in entertainment history. Dozens of arrests, hundreds of millions in seized assets, and a fundamental reshaping of how Hollywood finances major productions. The trial became a media sensation, though many details remained classified to protect ongoing investigations. Hardy testified for 3 days, detailing how the organization had manipulated his career without his knowledge. His testimony helped convict Castellano and 17 co-conspirators, who received sentences ranging from 15 years to life in prison. But the victory came at a cost. Death threats forced Hardy's family into protective custody for 8 months. Several attempts were made on his life by remaining members of the organization seeking revenge. The stress nearly destroyed his marriage and left him questioning whether he'd made the right choice. Tom Hardy's career survived the scandal, but it was forever changed. The roles that came after were different, smaller, more independent, chosen for artistic merit rather than commercial potential. He'd traded the security of criminal backing for the uncertainty of legitimate business. Studio executives, initially wary of working with someone connected to such a massive scandal, gradually realized that Hardy's integrity had actually saved the industry from even greater scrutiny. His willingness to risk everything to expose corruption made him a symbol of Hollywood's potential for self-policing.
The investigation also led to industry-wide reforms in film financing transparency. New regulations required detailed disclosure of funding sources for major productions, making it much harder for criminal organizations to use entertainment investments for money laundering. But for the first time in over a decade, every role he took was truly his choice, and that, he discovered, was worth more than all the dirty money in Hollywood. The warehouse where it all began was eventually demolished, replaced by luxury condominiums. But the FBI still uses recordings from that final meeting as training material, demonstrating how organized crime infiltrates legitimate businesses and how one person's courage can bring down an entire criminal empire. If this story shocked you about Hollywood's dark side, subscribe for more incredible celebrity investigations.